got a pretty major trade today. The Texans, they're getting running back David Montgomery from the Detroit Lions in exchange for a 4th-round draft pick this year, a 7th-round draft pick next year, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs. So that is the big trade today. And Brad, I think this was a must for Houston. Again, Joe Mixon, there's reports they're going to cut him right before free agency starts, had that freak foot injury, never played a single snap this year. They can cut him and save, I think, over $8 million in cap space. And so they had a running back attack, a running game that was just completely non-existent last year with Nick Chubb and Woody Marks and the other collection of, let's call it, non-effective running backs that they used, but it was mostly Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, and that in turn put pressure on C.J. Stroud. And so they get a veteran running back in David Montgomery, who now all of a sudden becomes the number one guy there. And David Montgomery is now 28 years old. He'll be 29 when the season starts. And in exchange, the Lions, they get a couple of draft picks. They get to try to bolster that offensive line, which just took a major downward spiral last year. And I think this works out for both teams. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs had more than taken over as the number one running back. He's a top 5 back in the league. We'll see. We'll talk about what Detroit's going to do to fill that gap, but this was a must trade for the Houston Texans. And one that they're taking a little bit of a risk on, because you do have an aging running back whose numbers have kind of gone down here the last few years, but they had to do something. And you get a veteran to pair with Woody Marks now in this running back room, and Houston's run game should hopefully get a big boost next year. So I like the trade for Houston. They are giving up a decent amount, but I felt like they had to.
Yeah, first and foremost, Mr. Boyle, Merry March Madness to you and yours. We're going to talk plenty of college basketball later on the show, and it's only appropriate that we start off the program with one of my ultimate man crushes, mandatory Montgomery Jackals, going from Detroit to the Houston Texans, as you already laid out. And I agree, man. I think this is an awesome landing spot for him. This is an offense that sorely needed a power running back, because Woody Marks was a little bit flimsy, you could say, in the open field. Not a guy that's really breaking a whole lot of tackles. Got wrapped up, got folded in half repeatedly. You don't believe me? He was RB 52 in yards after contact per attempt as tracked at Pro Football Focus last year. He only forced a measly 13.1% missed tackles on the entire campaign. So you bring in Montgomery, a guy that is a true surefire power running back, a guy that was RB 19 in yards after contact per attempt, and a guy too that has a nose for the end zone. Very efficient red zone running back. You got a lot of question marks there. The offensive line with Houston, they ranked outside the top 15 in run blocking efficiency, though they did take a step forward last year compared to the year before, in which they were rock bottom barrel in that category. Still, they only got a couple of guys on that offensive line under contract. That is going to be an area of investment they sorely and desperately need to address this offseason, whether in the NFL draft or whether in the free agency market. But I like the 1-2 punch that C.J. Stroud is going to have. And he's got a premier field stretcher there in Nico Collins, so alleviate some of the pressure and some of those stacked boxes. I say Dave Montgomery, especially you fantasy fans out there, a guy that's probably going to go like as an RB3 in 12-team drafts. You could confidently get him probably on the cheap in the middle portion of your draft, and he's likely going to churn out an RB2 value. I think he goes for 1,100 combined yards and 7 to 9 total touchdowns, Pat. Year one there, and somebody knocking the boots, H-Town. Just because he could break tackles, he got pretty tacky hands as well, and be remotely shocked if he caught 30 to 35 passes. I absolutely love this signing by the Houston Texans, because they had to slam that upgrade button and hard, given the fallout from Joe Mixon and the Chubb Club as well. Nick Chubb, just a shell of what he used to be, is what he exhibited this last season. So nice move by both teams, and a quality landing spot there for Dave Montgomery.
Yeah, phone number to join the show at 310-840-4910, 310-840-4910. If we got any Texans fans listening in the aforementioned H-Town, how do you feel about this trade? Running back room feels like it just got a major upgrade. If you're a Lions fan, definitely a bittersweet day. I saw Jahmyr Gibbs. He posted a broken heart emoji with the photo of them with Sonic and Knuckles. That was their nickname in Detroit, all the damage they did together. look, let's, it's always great to look at it from an optimistic side. Let's look at it from a pessimistic side because you mentioned Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb going into last year, not, I wouldn't say not even close to what David Montgomery is going into this season, but Nick Chubb had multiple reconstructive leg surgeries. I still think Texans fans thought that he was going to have a decent season, and he took a back seat almost immediately to Woody Marks. And that's not saying much. Woody Marks had a decent year, but like you said, was kind of flimsy, really struggled to break tackles, really struggled to get to that second level. And as a result, the Texans offense struggled, and they got themselves into way too many obvious passing situations. And you had an offensive line that not only struggled to block for the run, they struggled to block for the pass. And then C.J. Stroud under pressure all year. They were able to mitigate it with that amazing defense. But once they got to the playoffs, we saw what happened. What if David Montgomery is basically just a little bit glorified of a version of Nick Chubb this year? Then all of a sudden, you gave up a 4th-round pick, you give up an offensive lineman, and you give up a 7th-round pick next year. That's essentially discardable. But it's the 4th-round pick in this upcoming draft in just over a month from now, which is it's decently premium draft capital for the Lions to now have. So if David Montgomery shows his age this season, and it's crazy talking about a guy that's going to be 29, but look, I mean, he had 1,000 yards rushing in 2023. Last year, he only had 4.2 yards per carry, and he had 775 yards, but he did eat in the red zone, had 12 touchdowns. And this year, he had another 8 touchdowns, but once again, only 716 yards. And again, largely because he took a backseat to Jahmyr Gibbs. But now you're asking David Montgomery to be the number 1 running back for the first time in like 2.5, 3 years. I think that is definitely, that's something that Houston should be looking at with some kind of concern here. And they hope that Woody Marks is going to take a big step up. But, like I said, it's a move Houston had to make. That doesn't mean it's going to pan out for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate, a couple of questions you're tossing out there. But, he is not going to be a full-time starter for this team. I think he's somebody who's going to be very much engrossed in probably a 50-50 timeshare, quite frankly. And it's a slight upgrade based on the volume that he got in Detroit. He was only getting about 30-35% of the opportunity share in that offense. But, so he gets, 12 to 14 touches at most. Marks comes in, supplants him probably around 10, 11 times per game. You got that 1-2 punch. You keep both those guys healthy and upright as a result, given their minimized usage, and it's a win-win. Now, you could say, well, the 4th-round pick, they could have just gone out and drafted a rookie running back, probably super on the cheap, that could have brought something similar to the table as Dave Montgomery. Hey, I'm not going to argue against that. I think that's a fair point to be made, but, mandatory is a guy that can do a little bit of everything, excellent in pass protection as well. And again, it's the red zone efficiency that really stands out. He's a bloodhound for the chalk, and, he's going to find it early and often. It's just a matter of, will that offensive line be competent? That's the $64,000 question right now in Houston, and that is the area where they really have got to spend some high draft capital and really got to spend in the free agency market. But, the defensive support could have a lot of positive game script as a result, and he's a guy that can be that ground and pounder to salt away the clock when you have a sizable lead in the 4th quarter. So, again, correlate, synergize, and bring it all together. His skill set with this environment, as long as the offensive line is at least average, I think Dave Montgomery is easily going to match the price tag attached, and a guy that could definitely exceed expectations, even though he is a little bit longer in the tooth and entering his age 29 year.
Yeah, now let's look at it from Detroit's side of thing. And by the way, I mean, Houston, like I said, this is a move I feel like they had to make. It's just going to come down to, can David Montgomery show that he is still the running back from 2 years ago? Whereas, again, look at the last 3 games of the regular season for Detroit. He had 4 carries, 14 yards against Pittsburgh, who really struggled to stop those big, strong running backs. 10 carries, 25 yards against the Vikings in the game that basically ended their season, that disaster on Christmas. And then 8 carries, 42 yards against your Chicago Bears. Not a great ending to the season for him. But then again, Houston's got to get some kind of a run game going this year to give some help, take some of the pressure off C.J. Stroud. Their offense cannot afford to be one-dimensional either way. So it feels like they were in kind of in between a rock and a hard place. They had to give up some capital. What about Detroit? What if is there a chance the Lions will miss David Montgomery? And on the surface, I think the answer is like, no, dude, they got Jahmyr Gibbs. Are you kidding me? Now Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take on what? Even more usage, even more touches. They're going to put even more weight on his shoulders. What if Jahmyr Gibbs has a little downturn in productivity because of that? Or even worse, because it's the NFL, it's a sport where there's human violent car crashes every play. What if Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt? Then who do you turn to if you're Detroit? Last couple of years, you had a solid, awesome veteran backup option in David Montgomery. Now what's the plan for Detroit? How do they replace those touches every game from David Montgomery? Do they do it in the draft? Is it a running back with one of those fourth-round draft picks that they just got from Houston? Did they sign one of the cheaper options in free agency? Again, I understand Jahmyr Gibbs is amazing, top 3 back in the game, but you always now, it is almost, we don't see it. We don't see a team have a one-man running back room. And right now, the only other person that's a running back that's worth even mentioning on the Lions roster is Sione Vaki. And, that's me doing him a big favor, even mentioning him. So now the question for the Lions is, and GM Brad Holmes, how do they replace David Montgomery's 12 to 13 to 14 touches a game? That's a big question, because I don't think you can just say, oh, we got Jahmyr Gibbs, we're just going to give him the ball 35 times a game like it's 1995. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's not going to be Barry Sanders revisited by any stretch of the imagination. I agree with you on that point. But bingo, bango, bongo, man. I think you already hit the nail on the head. One of those fourth-round draft picks they already have in their back pocket, they're going to spend on a rookie running back. And somebody that's going to be a similar type, a similar ilk of what the skill set they bring to the table compared to Dave Montgomery, which is going to be that power rusher, a guy that gets some of those tough yards between the tackles. Gibbs is capable of doing that. A highly explosive guy, a jack of all trades, a legitimate 3-down running back, saw 63.6% of the opportunity share last year, just over 14 rush attempts per game, and he became very red zone efficient in his own right. He was number 4 in total red zone touches last season, and a guy that found the end zone 18 total times a year ago, a number of those coming in those red zone situations. So he had a couple of explosive runs in his own right. And of course, he's got excellent hands, a guy that's going to be in the conversation for number 1 overall pick in your fantasy football draft later on this year, coming up this summer. Certainly deserves that level of consideration. But yeah, man, they're going to go young. They're going to go cheap. Gibbs is not, I think, going to see this volume spike and be like a 325 touch back, assuming a 17-game season for him next year. I think they want to keep the opportunity share probably around 70% for him. So maybe a slight uptick. Again, it was 63.6 in that category last season. So they're looking to invest in a guy with young, fresh legs, muscular stature, and get some of those tough yards and move the chains and short yard situations, and supplant Gibbs probably around 8 to 10 times per game. And that's it. And they can definitely find somebody that checks that box in round 4. So I think that will be the strategy. That will be the motivation that Dan Campbell and company employ come the NFL draft and come the upcoming season. But, man, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to go off no matter what the damn workload is.